Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today we're doing an interesting video on why you probably shouldn't back the Starmork board game table because it's probably a scam, but it also might not totally be a scam at all. In fact, I don't actually know. I'm just going to be able to tell you what I would do as a consumer. This is the Starmork board game table. It's over on Kickstarter, 409 backers, $260,000 raised, and it's this is the second time we're seeing something like this. The last time would be the Tiozo game table, which was absolutely a scam, or at least seems to have been a scam, with 1,393 people losing $426,000 on this game table, and I talked about that one loosely, but I talked about it, should you back it, or to back or not to back, but I didn't do a dedicated video on it, and in hindsight I kind of wish I did, which is why I'm here today. But first, some disclaimers before we get into all this. There's a lot to get into today, but the main disclaimer is I work for GameFound. I don't hide this, I talk about it a lot. I'm CMO of GameFound, and I'm about to criticize a campaign that is on Kickstarter. I'm not necessarily criticizing Kickstarter, although it would be great if they weighed into an extent, but also, as someone who works for GameFound, I understand the complexities of weighing in on these things. Honestly, as somebody who's just commenting on this in general, there's a lot of complexities to pointing a finger at something and saying, hey, that looks like a scam, because what if it's not a scam? It's complicated, we'll get into all that soon, but first, just from the GameFound standpoint, I debated not doing this video because of that, but I also try to cover the industry in general, so disclaimer, I work for GameFound, take that into account in any way that this does or doesn't bias you towards, or bias me towards the coverage of this. Also, if you ever see something on GameFound that looks like a scam that you are concerned about, any concerns at all, feel free to email me at alex@boardgameco.com or a.radcliffe@gamefound.com. Both those emails are always in the video description, and I'm happy to talk and communicate about any single thing, and in the past when something has looked like a scam, I have taken it to the team, we've looked into it, and we've done what we needed to do. So I just want to make sure you have an open line of communication there. Separately from that, back to the Starmork board game table, the first and most important thing I'm going to say is I cannot say with certainty that it's a scam. I can also point to reasons why I think it might not be a scam. There are things that are different about this from the Tiozo game table. Also, I can tell you what I would or wouldn't do as a backer, and as a backer, I would not back this. And there's lots of things that make it look like a scam too. There's things in both camps, and so the biggest thing you have to do is you have to understand the risk going into it. This looks like it could be a scam, and there's reasons to think it might not be a scam. I can't possibly tell you what it is, which is also why I tend to be very hesitant about these kinds of videos in general. Going back, we'll get to the game table soon. I tend to be very hesitant about these kinds of videos because there's two ethical responsibilities I have. I have an ethical responsibility to not point a finger at thing and casually say, hey, that's a scam. Because I could ruin someone's business through that. I can point to a lot of people who will then therefore not back the project, and if it wasn't a scam, on that guy on YouTube who didn't do his research, didn't do his due diligence, pointed his finger, made a judgment call, and a whole lot of people walk away thinking it's a scam. And so the biggest thing I have to say, I can't be certain this is a scam. I can only tell you there are things that are very similar from this in the Tiozo game table, and there are reasons why I would not back this game, and there are reasons why you should be mindful with your money. Which brings me to the other side of that sword over there, that ethical responsibility, which is I have an ethical responsibility to you as well. I can't just look at things that look problematic and say, well, I don't know it's problematic, so I'm not going to say anything. The best thing I can do is try to talk about it with as much fairness as possible, covering all the pros and the cons, and to give you the information so that you can make an informed decision to the best of your ability based on what I am able to at least showcase or talk about, or at the very least highlight. There are 409 people on this campaign. I have no idea how many of those people have made the decision as to whether they should or shouldn't risk that this might or might not be a scam, versus how many blindly backed it, have no idea of any of the drama, and this video might save them a lot of money. This is who that video is for. And so I want to be very clear, these videos are hard. I don't want that pressure. I don't want to hurt a business if it's a legitimate business, but I also don't want you to lose money if it isn't a legitimate business. This is also where I understand. I don't know what Kickstarter is doing on this table in the back end. I have no idea what their awareness is. I know that a whole lot of people complained very actively about the Tiozo game table, which looked like so much more of a scam. And we'll get into the whys and the hows and the details. Tiozo looked like much more of a scam than the Starmork, and a lot of people reported to Kickstarter, and nothing happened. But again, I want to be hesitant about. It is hard. I don't know what goes on in the back end. What I can say, at least from the GameFound perspective, is that if you're a platform and you are looking at something and you can't validate that it is or isn't a problem, it is complicated. It is complicated to that same responsibility. Do we shut down something because there are some red flags? How many red flags does it take before we shut something down? It is always a complicated decision, and there are never easy answers. With that said, let's go ahead and dive into the campaign. The Starmork board game table is a $349 multi-mission game table, offering a table at a price point that does not look like it is found elsewhere. That's the first and biggest red flag you have here, something that is too good to be true. This price point, $349 for a full board game table, LEDs, accessories, lights, all these things, that is an incredibly, with hoppers, it's got the whole shebang for $349. You cannot find this price point for this kind of table anywhere else except for the Teozo game table. That is the first and biggest red flag we have over here. Now, to be fair to Starmork, the Teozo game table is offering it at an even better price point, $229. So again, when I talk about how Teozo looked like more of a scam and seems to have been a scam, I want to be very clear, Starmork has some of the similarities to Teozo, but not necessarily all the same. So it's less scammy than the other. The location of the company also is a factor, although you could make an argument that that is why they're able to do it so cheaply. But both these companies did seem to be based out of China, and that could be an argument as to why they're doing it cheaply, but it also does remove some of the accountability should things go south. There are a lot more tools and options and resources at your disposal, not a ton to be very clear. If you back a board game table from a US company, you might find yourself in the exact same problem should they not deliver, but there are certainly more tools, more accountability if you are talking about something in the US versus talking about something in China in this case. So that is another potential issue. The communication in both these campaigns, it was lacking as far as the way they engaged with the backers, although in the case of Teozo, they engaged nearly not at all. They pinned constant updates to the top that would hide your ability to actually see any complaints. They avoided any reasonable questions. They never really showed you anything from the back end. The whole thing was much more sheltered as far as what they were able to do. Starmork, on the other hand, they actually recently added, I want to say, where's the About Us over here? They recently added some videos. I think these are just added yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, showing you meet the team, show you the faces behind the table, show you these are real people, their offices, the Starmork assembly video. They showed you a lot more in this video. Sorry. Sorry about that. They show you a lot more in this video about who the people are and what they seem to be more of a real company, a real office, real people. They're smiling, they're there, they're present. It doesn't mean that they're not about to take your money, but it also makes it a slightly harder. The biggest hesitancy I personally have is that human connection. I am a sucker for believing the best about people, and if you're willing to get on camera, show you the offices, say hi to everyone, I have a hard time believing that you're about to take their money. It is so... It's so much, it goes against everything I believe in and how I operate, and so to me, that's the biggest reason that I'm like, they're good people. They're good people. They're just trying to make a living. They're just trying to sell a good table, and everyone out here is telling you it's a scam, and it had me very hesitant to this video, to be frank. And that's why I want to say very clearly, I cannot say it's a scam. I cannot say that. I can just say there's too many red flags. One of the things that was brought up is that they emailed a lot of creators, including myself, to say, hey, do you want to review this board game table? And then when the creators responded, including myself, they never responded or followed up from there. So they're like, hey, by the way, here's this game table, which begs the question as to why they would do that in the first place. Like, what was the upside of that? Which again goes into almost maybe it's not a scam, it's just bad management, I don't know. But they emailed a lot of creators being like, hey, you can, not just like, tell people at the table. It wasn't even like, hey, tell people at our campaign. It was, you can review this table, and then they just never responded to any of the creators out there, which again is not a great sign, but it could point to poor management as much as anything else, and so that's a hard one to judge it by. They also have that 3% cashback thing where they're basically trying to get everyone to tell everyone about the table, which is not inherently a problem, but everything about this campaign points to the idea that they are marketing the idea of getting as many people out there, trying to give you the incentive to try to get as many people to look at things and to back this and to be aware of the campaign, and they're doing it at a price point that seems not viable. That's most of what I have. Oh, and then the updates. The updates as well. Updates and comments. Again, if you look at that, there is some degree of effort to communicate, more so than Teozo, but not nearly what you would actually want or need. There's a lot of obfuscation saying, hey, we see the complaints. They're shutting people down on their Facebook page. There's trying to quell the people who have questions. And all of that points to a situation where you might be getting a good board game table at a good price point. You absolutely might. But there's a whole lot of reasons to question. The main point of this video is not to say the Starmork board game table is a scam, because I couldn't possibly say that. I don't know that. I couldn't know that. I could not know that the Starmork board game table is a scam. And I'm worried that this video might be legitimately hurting a company that is just trying to do their best in a space that is growing, is popular, and maybe they were able to put together a $349 board game table that's able to give you what you... Maybe everything's totally viable, and maybe this video hurts them, and I feel bad about that. But there's also a lot of red flags. Red flags that would seem to indicate that you should not be backing this campaign unless you are comfortable with the fact that it is a risk. That's true of all campaigns, but there is a difference between, that 4% risk, that 2% risk, and that 25, 35, 50% risk. I would not in any way be confident that I would get my money back or a table if I were to back this campaign. It seems too good to be true. There are red flags. There's similarity, and there's also incentives. Anyone looking at the side of the Tioza game table and how they're able to get $500,000 and do nothing to do that, that's incentives to a lot of people to say, hey, this might be the easiest way to make a whole chunk of change all at once with a very low upfront cost, and a whole lot of people who are bought in by the promise and the premise that you might get something really cool at a really great price point. There will always be people who are in a rush to take advantage of the fact that someone out there wants something and is willing to pay for it. And too good to be true is a saying for a reason. Kickstarter restricted Tiozo. They did so, but they did so a year and a half after the project ended, or however long, I don't know if it was a year and a half. They did so a long time after the project ended. After it was too late, after the money was gone, the campaign was shut down. I don't know what led them to make that determination at that point, what the final line in the sand was, although lack of communication after the money's gone, there's definitely more reasons to at a certain point in time. But Starmork is certainly in that red flag zone at the moment. So this is a public service announcement. If something is too good to be true, understand that it might be. Not that it is, but understand that it might be. If you are someone who is backing the Starmork board game table, understand that you might not see your money or your table. Again, always true, much more so here. If you are the Starmork team, and you are a legitimate company just trying to do the best, my genuine apologies for the fact that I have to try to be mindful of my responsibilities to anyone and everyone. And in this case, it looks not great. It looks not great. I'm sorry if it's completely legitimate. I really am. But it really looks not great. And that's kind of what this video is. The Starmork board game table is something that you should be very, very cautious about if you back it. In any case, until next time, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co. I hope this video was helpful to someone in some way. If you are one of those 409 people backing this campaign, and then you didn't realize any of this drama, and you decided not to back it because of this, let me know in the comments down below, because I am curious how many of you there are, or alternatively, how much am I already talking to people who already know to stay well away from this campaign. In any case, until next time, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co. and I hope you have a good one.